"Why are you doing this to me, Mom?" That was the subject line. I didn't know what I was expecting when I opened Rachel's email that morning. I had just poured my second cup of coffee, letting the blinds tilt open a bit, little strips of March sunlight sliding across the kitchen counter. Outside, the robins were chirping like it was spring already. The dishwasher was humming. Everything felt normal, familiar, safe. And then that one line cracked it all wide open. I don't even know what hurt more, her question or the fact that she asked it after what she'd done. Rachel had uninvited me from her wedding. No phone call, no face-to-face conversation, just an email. A list, really. Venue space, catering costs, something about the ceremony being intimate. Like I was just another detail that didn't make the cut. And then, at the very end, she wrote, "Should be just like being there, LOL." I stared at that line for longer than I'd like to admit. 3 letters, probably meant to soften the blow, but they just fell flat, like a joke no one laughed at. There wasn't a single word about love, not even a sorry, just cold, clean logistics. I didn't write back right away. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the steam rise off my mug until it disappeared. And when I caught my reflection in the black screen, I looked older than I felt, more tired, worn. That's what happens when you've been needed for so long, you start to vanish the moment you're not. Eventually, I typed a reply. "Sure, enjoy your big day." 4 words. That's it. I didn't reread it, didn't overthink it. I hit send, closed the laptop, and let the silence speak for me. I pulled my cardigan a little tighter, slipped on my flats, and headed out the door like always. Same drive, same voice on the radio talking about I-105 traffic, same sleepy barista handing me my plain latte. Nothing looked different, but everything had changed. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about every little thing I had done over the years that no one seemed to remember. The birthdays I spent alone so they could split holidays. The loans I signed for. The casseroles I left on porches when I wasn't welcome inside. And just like that, all of it, erased by one email. When I pulled into the parking lot, my phone buzzed in my bag. Probably Rachel, or Jason, or maybe no one. I let it ring. Then I just sat there in the car for a moment longer, letting the sunlight warm the backs of my hands. Something in me had shifted. Not shattered, just reset. I didn't reply with anger, just 4 simple words. And somehow, that silence said more than any argument ever could. Have you ever been told, without anyone saying it out loud, that you don't matter anymore? If any of this sounds familiar, I'd really like to hear your story. Sometimes, knowing you're not the only one feeling left out, it helps. And if you're wondering what I did next, well, let's just say it wasn't what they expected. I drove to work like I always did. Same route, same travel mug, same beige Nissan, humming just enough to muffle the noise in my head. But inside, something was different. It wasn't anger, not yet. Just this quiet unraveling, like a loose thread in a sweater. You don't really notice it at first, not until the whole sleeve starts to fall apart. They never saw the bills I juggled, the birthdays I spent alone so they could enjoy theirs without guilt. My office was on the 4th floor of a red brick building in downtown Eugene. Nothing fancy, just clean, simple. The kind of place where remembering to water your plant once a month feels like a small personal win. I dropped my bag, turned on the little desk lamp, and caught my reflection in the dark monitor. Tired eyes, lipstick barely there. I used to tell myself, there'll be time for me later. Funny how that never came. Alan, my boss, popped his head in. "You're early." "I'm always early," I said with just a hint of a smile. He stepped inside with a latte, my regular.
"Still," he said, setting it down, "you look different." I could have told him everything right then. Could have just let it all spill out, sitting there with paper cups and bad lighting. But I didn't. I just thanked him, took a sip, and let the moment pass. It tasted like every other morning. The day moved along. Meetings, paperwork, legal briefs. My phone kept buzzing under my palm like a heartbeat I didn't want to hear. First Rachel, then Jason. One message talking about clearing things up, another saying there's still time to talk. I didn't answer. Instead, my mind wandered. Back to tiny kitchens where I used to iron uniforms at midnight. The smell of lemon cleaner on cheap linoleum. Back to when Rachel broke her leg at 10 and I stayed up for 3 nights straight. To Jason's first car, bought on a whim, paid for with my emergency savings. I remembered every loan, every cosign, every holiday I spent giving, hoping for a simple thank you that never came. By 5:30, I packed up, but instead of going home, I turned left, walked 3 blocks through the cold, and stepped into the bank. Carlos greeted me like always. "Miss Rivers," he smiled, "what can I do for you today?" "I need to cancel a wire transfer," I said, handing him the slip. He paused. "The $50,000 for the venue?" I nodded. "It hasn't cleared yet," he said, after typing for a moment. "You're still within the reversal window." "Good," I said, quietly, mostly to myself. He handed over the paperwork. My signature looked steady, even if my heart wasn't. "No special occasion, after all?" he asked, gently. I looked at him and said, "Not for me." When I stepped outside, dusk had already settled in. My phone buzzed again, and I could almost hear Rachel's voice in my head, polite but sharp in that way only she could manage. But I didn't look. Not looking felt like freedom. And right there, standing by myself under the neon bank sign, hands wrapped around nothing but my own decision, I felt something come back. Not bitterness, not pride, just clarity. Maybe later had finally shown up. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already dipping behind the pine trees. Long shadows stretched across the lawn. My phone was still face down on the passenger seat, lighting up with 17 missed calls. 9 from Rachel, 4 from Jason, 1 from Thomas's mother. I didn't bother checking the rest. Inside, the house smelled like lavender polish and dust, still quiet. I hung up my coat, walked into the kitchen, and reached for that bottle of red I'd bought last Thanksgiving but never opened. Back then, I thought maybe we'd all sit down, laugh like we used to. That bottle had just sat there since, watching. Tonight, it wouldn't wait any longer. I poured a glass, sat down on the couch, and let the golden light spill across the walls. The other glass on the table stayed empty. I hadn't planned on sharing. Barely 2 sips in, the doorbell rang. It was Jason. His tie was loose, hair a mess, like he'd been pulling at it the whole drive over. "She says you're being difficult," he blurted. No hello. I stepped back. "Come in if you're going to." He walked in, didn't even take off his shoes, started pacing like my carpet was a courtroom. Rachel and Thomas are freaking out, the florists threatening to cancel, the caterers holding the date hostage, and the venue. God, Mom, what were you thinking? I took a slow sip. I was thinking I'd had enough. Jason froze. "You canceled the transfer?" "Yes." "You didn't even tell her?" "She didn't invite me to her wedding," I said. "I figured we weren't speaking." "Mom, come on, you're overreacting." I let out a short laugh, breathless. "You think this is about flowers?" He threw his hands up. "Then what is it about?" I stood and placed the glass down carefully. "It's about 30 years of putting everyone else first. It's about working 2 jobs after your father died. It's about co-signing your mortgage when I could barely cover my own. It's about Rachel calling me last week, not to ask how I was, but to make sure the check had cleared." Jason's jaw tensed. but he said nothing. I pointed to the door. "Get out of my house." "Mom." "Jason." I didn't yell. If anything, my voice got quieter. I said, "Get out." He stood there a little too long, like he wanted to say something meaningful. But in the end, all he did was shake his head and walk out. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut. Still, it echoed like thunder. I stood there, just watching the hallway, my hand still curled from pointing. The wine sat untouched. And the silence, it didn't press in. It settled. For once, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. The last of the light slipped through the window, painting the room gold before fading into blue. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to apologize for the quiet. The next morning, I didn't wake up to an alarm. I woke up to 23 unread messages and a silence so deep it felt like it had weight. But it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I slid my feet into my slippers and padded to the kitchen. Soft morning light filtered through the blinds, catching little specks of dust in the air. The whole room smelled like fresh coffee and a hint of lilac coming in through the open window above the sink. I poured myself a cup into my favorite chipped mug, the one Rachel painted when she was 10, covered in tiny blue hearts. Most had faded by now, but 2 still clung to the handle, stubborn little things. I sat down and picked up my phone. The first message said, "If you don't send the payment by tomorrow, we lose everything." Funny, I'd already lost her days ago. I kept scrolling. The tone shifted with every message, like watching a storm roll in, one cloud at a time. First came guilt. "I'm sorry I was harsh. Planning a wedding is just overwhelming." Then urgency. "We're on the verge of losing the venue." Then pressure. "Thomas's parents said this would happen. You're proving them right." That one stopped me. I could still picture her at 15, sitting at our kitchen table, tear-streaked over a failed geometry test. "You always fix things, Mom," she'd whispered. I used to think that was love. Now, I wondered if it was just training. One email stood out. "If you send the full amount, we can talk to Thomas's parents about inviting you after all. I'll see what I can do." I stared at that screen for a long time. The little blinking cursor below her words almost felt like it was daring me to cave. But I didn't. I deleted the email. No big scene, no dramatic key smashing. Just delete. I folded the phone shut and set it face down. Then I poured another cup of coffee, curled up in the armchair by the window, and opened a novel I'd been meaning to read for years. The pages felt good in my hands, solid, steady, real. Outside, a sparrow landed on the feeder, pecking in a slow rhythm. The street beyond my porch was quiet. Even Eugene, usually so restless this time of year, felt like it had taken a deep breath with me. I read 3 chapters without stopping. No glancing at my phone, no background noise in my head, just me, the story, and a quiet morning I hadn't given away to anyone. By the time I closed the book, the sun had shifted and the house had warmed up. I stood to stretch. My joints complained a little, but my mind was calm. I passed by the phone on the table, didn't throw it, just left it there, face down. And for the first time in years, I finished something without waiting for anyone's call. By Thursday evening, I thought maybe the storm had passed. The messages had stopped. My phone had been quiet for almost a full day, just a grocery store promo and a reminder from my dentist. For once, silence actually felt like peace. Then came the knock. Not rushed, not hesitant, just steady, intentional. I opened the door. It wasn't Jason. It was Sophia, Rachel's best friend since 3rd grade. standing there on my porch with a pie box in her hands, and an apology that wasn't really hers to give. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she was wearing one of those old, oversized college sweatshirts, hanging off her shoulders like a memory you never quite put away. Her eyes looked tired, but kind. "Hi, Mrs. Rivers," she said. I hadn't heard that name spoken with warmth in a long time. "Hi, Sophia," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She handed me the pie, cherry, homemade, still warm. I didn't ask how she got my address. I didn't need to. In the kitchen, I set the box down without opening it and turned on the kettle. The soft hiss of water heating filled the room, along with the quiet creak of old chairs settling. We sat there in silence while the sky outside faded to lavender. "She's falling apart," Sophia finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "Rachel, she's been crying constantly. She's not eating. I don't even know what to say to her anymore." I nodded but didn't respond. "She keeps saying she didn't do anything wrong," Sophia went on, tugging at her sweatshirt sleeve. "That you're being cold, that you're making everything about the money." I stirred the tea and handed her a cup.
"I think she believes," I said softly, "that if she just finds the right words, the money will still show up." Sophia looked down. "She asked me to come," she said, "to ask what she can say to fix it." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned over and lifted the edge of the pie box. The crust was golden, a little uneven. I closed it again. "Would she have said anything," I asked, "if the money had already cleared?" Sophia didn't move. Her eyes went glassy, and her shoulders sank. "I don't think so," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Then there's nothing she can say. Not now." The tea between us sat untouched, growing cold. I looked at her, really looked. The way her jaw was tight, the way she blinked fast like she was holding something back. She looked just like Rachel had once, when they were 10, curled up in sleeping bags on my living room floor, whispering flashlight secrets and giggling about crushes and who'd grow up first. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, years later, with one of them grown, saying the things the other couldn't. After a while, Sophia stood. She brushed invisible crumbs off her jeans. "I get it," she said quietly, "even if she never will." She didn't take the pie with her, and I didn't offer. When she closed the door behind her, I stayed at the kitchen table. The tea had gone cold, the pie was still untouched, and outside, the sky slowly turned to blue. Jason told me the wedding still happened, just not the way Rachel planned. No vineyard, no string quartet, no vintage window pane photo booth. Instead, it was folding chairs in Thomas's parents' backyard. Half the flowers never arrived, and the Bluetooth speaker kept cutting out, right in the middle of their vows. "She cried a lot," Jason said over the phone. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound sorry either, just tired. I was sitting on the porch when he called. The sun had softened into that hazy late afternoon light, shining through the dogwood branches I'd finally trimmed the weekend before. My iced tea was sweating on the side table, mint leaves floating slow and lazy. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask for pictures. Jason kept talking, for a while, about how Thomas's mom did her best, how the dress still looked beautiful, how the officiant forgot Rachel's middle name, but recovered pretty well. I listened, quietly. There were moments I used to picture, back when Rachel was small enough to fall asleep on my shoulder. She once told me she wanted to marry someone who liked reading. Back then, I imagined walking her down the aisle myself, just the two of us. Her father had passed too early for us to picture it any other way. But dreams have a way of fading long before reality steps in. A few days later, Rachel sent a long email. Subject line, "I didn't know what else to say." I opened it, read it once. Lines like,
I was under a lot of pressure, and "you know I didn't mean to make you feel excluded" rolled across the screen. There was a half apology somewhere in between "I was overwhelmed" and "Thomas's parents said it was normal." She even said her therapist told her she had boundary issues. She said maybe someday we could talk. I archived it. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just because I didn't need to carry it anymore. Later that evening, Alan texted, "Still on for lunch next week? Your pick, just no tofu place, please." I smiled, typed, "You're safe," and hit send. There's something steadying about watering plants. You don't get fireworks, no big transformation overnight, just quiet proof that care adds up, drop by drop. I moved slowly through the porch pots, letting the hose twist around my ankles, letting the soil drink it all in. Birdsong drifted from somewhere across the fence. A neighbor's wind chime added its little punctuation. And for the first time in a long time, I noticed how soft the breeze felt on my face. No, I didn't miss the wedding. What I'd missed, really, truly missed for years, was myself. Always showing up, always giving, always hoping to be appreciated by people who only reached out when something broke. And now, I was still here, still drinking tea on a warm Sunday, still getting texts about lunch dates, still planting thyme and basil and hydrangeas that might not bloom until June. And that's okay. Life's not on anyone else's schedule anymore. The email? It's still there, archived, not deleted, not answered, just somewhere I don't need to go back to. I didn't miss the wedding. I just finally showed up for my own life. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever been left out of something you helped build, tell me. I'd really love to hear your story too. And if you're still here, thank you for listening. This isn't the end. Not for me. There's still more to say, more to feel, and maybe, just maybe, more to reclaim. Hit subscribe if you want to keep walking with me, and leave a comment below. Have you ever chosen peace over being invited? A week after the wedding, I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. I didn't tell anyone, not even Alan, even though he'd texted me a picture of some garden sculpture he thought I'd like. The studio smelled like wet earth and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe hope. Afternoon light poured through these tall windows, warming the long table where I found my seat. Third from the end, next to a woman with silver curls and deep laugh lines. Her name was Joan. She didn't ask why I was there. She just looked at the clay, gave a small nod, and said, "You'll know what it needs, eventually." My first bowl collapsed in on itself. The second one stood, barely. It wobbled like a toddler taking its first step. I kept them both. I wasn't there to be perfect. I was there to just be. While my hands shaped that third lump of clay, I remembered Rachel at 10 years old, face dusted with flour, asking if her lemon tart would ever taste like mine. I'd told her, even mistakes can hold beauty if you don't rush to throw them away. Joan glanced at my second bowl and smiled. "It's honest," she said. "That counts for a lot." Back home, the house was quiet, but not empty. I preheated the oven, sifted the flour, zested lemons. The radio played something soft and slow in the background. And for the first time in years, I baked a lemon tart. Not for Rachel, not for Jason, not for a potluck or a holiday. Just for me. I didn't pull out the good china, didn't light a candle. I just cut a clean slice, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The tart was still warm. The crust barely held together. The filling was bright, a little tangy, just enough to wake up my tongue. My phone lit up once. Alan again. Just a simple, "How's your day?" I smiled, tapped a thumbs up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to say more. It was enough. For a second, I thought about texting Rachel, sending her a picture of the tart, asking if she remembered. But the feeling passed, soft as a breeze. I reached for another bite instead. That moment, that little silence where I didn't reach out first, it felt like more than peace. It felt like healing. Outside, the sky turned a soft coral. The tart was still warm when I finished the last bite, and for once, I didn't wish anyone else were there to share it. I was pouring myself a second cup of lukewarm coffee when she walked up to me. She was short, wearing a lavender cardigan buttoned all the way up, and had this kind smile that trembled just a little. "Are you Rachel's mom?" she asked, tilting her head like it was the most ordinary question in the world. I paused, then said, "Not today." Her smile faded for just a second, then popped right back, automatic. "Oh, I must have mixed you up with someone else. Sorry about that." I gave a small nod and turned back to the coffee urn. And for some reason, that styrofoam cup in my hand felt lighter, like the weight of that name had finally slipped out through the bottom. It was Sunday morning at the Unitarian Church on 11th and Pine. A modest place, wood beams, soft organ music. I hadn't been in a while, but something about the light through the stained glass, warm, muted, didn't feel like an arrival. It felt like a return. During the hymns, I didn't sing. I just let the words wash over me. I didn't need to believe every line. Some things aren't about belief anyway. Some things are just about being there. During coffee hour, I found a seat by the window. They were serving shortbread cookies and cut-up grapes, like they usually do. I was halfway through a cookie when I heard a familiar voice. "Well, this is a surprise." I looked up. Alan McCarthy, hands in his jacket pockets, a sheepish grin on his face. "You don't strike me as the church-going type," I said. "I'm not," he laughed, "but I've been meaning to visit this place for years. Figured today was as good a day as any." He sat down next to me, close but not too close. We started with books. He'd just reread To Kill a Mockingbird. Then sourdough starters. Mine was still dormant in the fridge. Then gardening. I mentioned my azaleas were blooming early this year. He asked if I used coffee grounds in the soil. I didn't, but I made a mental note to try it. Across the room, the cardigan woman, Mrs. Granger, had found someone else to chat with. I caught little bits of her voice. "Rachel looked beautiful in her gown. You saw the pictures, right? On Facebook?" I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. When Alan looked at me, a little curious, I just said, "I'm happy for her." Then I offered him the last shortbread cookie on my napkin. He took it with a chuckle, and we moved on. Later, as people started leaving, Alan leaned in and said, "You seem lighter lately." It wasn't flirtation, wasn't even a compliment, really, but it felt true. Something settled in me when he said it. I hadn't noticed it myself, not the shift, not the weightlifting, but maybe it had. Maybe I was lighter. Not because the past was gone, but because I'd finally stopped carrying it in both hands. On the walk home, I passed a group of moms pushing strollers, laughing about something I couldn't quite hear. I smiled, not because I missed that part of life, but because I didn't need it to define me anymore. Maybe I didn't lose being a mother. Maybe I just stopped using it to be my whole name. I was folding laundry when I saw it. Tucked between a catalog and a credit union flyer, there it was, an envelope that looked like it had been sitting there all day, just waiting. White, thick, no printed labels, just a handwritten return address in a slant I knew by heart. Rachel's handwriting hasn't changed, not even when everything else did. I stood there at the counter, towel in one hand, envelope in the other. For a long moment, I didn't move, just stared at the way she wrote her R. The loop in her Y, still the same as when she was a kid doing cursive homework. Eventually, I stepped out to the porch. Twilight had started to settle in, that kind of light that turns everything soft and lavender, still. I poured myself a glass of wine, but didn't touch it. The envelope just sat on my lap, like a question I didn't really want to answer. I opened it. The letter was long, 2 full pages, front and back. She wrote that she hadn't been herself lately. that the wedding planning was a pressure cooker, that Thomas's parents had strong opinions. She said she regretted how things happened, that she let it spiral. She said she was sorry. And then, tucked navy end, quiet but sharp, like a splinter hidden in cotton, "You embarrassed me by pulling the money." There it was. The apology came with a string attached. I read it twice, not looking for more, just making sure I hadn't missed something softer, something real. But it was all there, a careful mix of guilt, justification, and a hint of blame. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope, then just sat there, holding it between my fingers. Not angry, not even hurt, just clear. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it just means letting go, while keeping that door closed. I pulled a blank note card from the drawer beside my kitchen table, the kind I used to use for thank you notes, back when people still sent those. And I wrote one sentence. "I love you, but I love me too." No return address, no date, no stamp. I tucked it gently into the drawer, right next to a stack of old recipes and a broken fountain pen. It didn't need to go anywhere. Some things aren't meant to travel. Some things are just meant to exist. Quiet, simple, true. When I came back to the porch, the wine glass was still full. I didn't drink it. I didn't need to. Some things you send. Some things you keep. And some you just let rest. June arrived like a sigh, warm, slow, and full of things quietly growing. The garden had softened somehow. Hydrangeas starting to blush blue at the edges, lavender swaying gently in the wind. I'd just finished steeping a pot of chamomile when the doorbell rang, 4:12 in the afternoon. No emails, no texts, no heads up. Just Rachel, standing on my front porch, empty-handed. Her hair was pulled back loosely, like she hadn't decided if she planned to stay long. She was wearing flats I didn't recognize, simple, practical, and a wrinkled blouse with the dry cleaning tag still half tucked inside. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped back and opened the door wider. She didn't say thank you, just walked past me into the living room like it was a museum of someone she used to know. She glanced at the bookshelf, noticed 2 titles that hadn't been there before, saw the new throw pillow, paused at the dining table where a single placemat and teacup were already set out. "Tea?" I offered. She nodded. No hugs, no tears, just that one small nod. I poured the tea slowly, letting the silence settle in with the steam. Rachel stood by the window, watching the breeze shift the wind chimes I'd hung last month. Their sound was soft, almost too polite. She didn't sit, didn't drink, just stared. And then finally she said it. "Why are you doing this to me?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said, wrapping my hands around the cup. "I'm just not doing it for you anymore." Those words just sat there between us, light but unshakable. Her eyes landed on the lemon tart cookbook still open on the counter. I'd used it again last night. She used to flip through it with me when she was little, back when baking meant licking spoons and making messes on purpose. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," she said softly. Neither did I. No bitterness in my voice, just the truth, plain and clear. She finally sat down, but just on the edge of the chair, like she wasn't sure she was allowed the whole seat. She didn't touch the tea. I didn't offer sugar. "I thought maybe you'd come around," she said. "I did," I told her. "Just not the way you meant." And then we sat there, not fixing anything, not forcing anything, just breathing the same air for a while. 10 minutes later, she stood up. No goodbye, no sudden embrace, just a pause in the doorway where something could have happened but didn't. The tea had gone cold. The wind chimes clicked again, just a bit louder this time. She stepped outside. Her shadow slipped off the porch like it didn't belong anymore. And then she was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't chase. I just walked back to the table, picked up my cup, and took a sip anyway. It was bitter, but honest. And the door? I didn't lock it behind her. Rachel didn't call, but she posted a photo. It was a ceramic bowl, lopsided, gray-blue. The caption said, "Trying again." I didn't find it myself. I saw it over Joan's shoulder in class while we were waiting for the kiln to cool. She was scrolling through her phone and paused, thumb hovering midair. "I think that's your daughter," she said, gently tilting the screen toward me. There it was, the shape, the soft glaze, that faint dip where the rim had collapsed just a bit, not unlike my first bowl. I didn't reach for the phone, just nodded, smiled, barely. We didn't talk about it. That evening, the sun sank slow behind the hills, brushing the garden in gold and lavender. I brought in a small harvest, rosemary, a few early tomatoes, 2 sprigs of thyme. Alan stopped by with a bundle of basil wrapped in a dish towel. "Too much in my yard," he said, like he wasn't really expecting anything back. I offered him iced tea, a seat on the porch, but he had somewhere to be. Stayed just long enough to notice how my tomatoes were finally catching up with the season. Then he left. No big goodbye, just good soil between us. Later, I went inside and stood in front of my latest piece from class. It looked almost exactly like the bowl in Rachel's photo. Same soft color, same quiet flaw along the rim. I turned it over, and without really knowing why, I wrote her name on the base with a dry pencil. Rachel Rivers. I didn't glaze it, didn't seal it, didn't fire it again. Just left it as it was, unfinished, soft to the touch, a bowl that could fall apart if not handled with care. There was something sacred in leaving it that way. That night, I poured a glass of rosé and put on an old Carole King record. The air smelled faintly of basil and lemon balm. I sat by the open window, the bowl resting in my lap. I didn't pick up my phone, didn't like her post, didn't send a message that started with, "I saw your bowl." I just sat. The silence didn't feel heavy. It felt whole. Joan's words came back to me. We don't fix what's broken. We learn to build differently. Maybe that's all Rachel was doing, trying to build again in her own way. And maybe I was too.
I placed my bowl on the windowsill, just above the herbs. The light caught it gently, the uneven rim catching the last bit of dusk. I didn't post mine, but I put it in the window, just in case she ever walked by. Summer came with bees, ripe tomatoes, and a second lemon dart. I made it again, not for Rachel, not even for me, just because I could. The sun hung heavy over the garden, warming the basil and coaxing the cherry tomatoes into little red gems. I wore my wide-brimmed straw hat, not because I needed to, really, but because it felt like part of the ritual. I watered each row slowly, letting the hose hiss and sputter against the thirsty soil. Cicadas buzzed somewhere in the trees, loud but oddly comforting. The tart took its time. Same crust, same filling, same slow, patient stirring over the stove until the custard thickened just right. The scent of lemon and vanilla wrapped through the kitchen, mixing with the earthy smell still clinging to my hands from the garden. The oven timer dinged softly, but I already knew. I could smell it, that sweet, sharp aroma of something that didn't need applause or a crowd. It just existed, like me. Around 3 o'clock, the neighbor kids wandered over. 2 of them, twins, sticky with watermelon and curiosity. I offered slices without asking names. They sat on the porch steps, swinging their legs, devouring every crumb like it was treasure. One of them looked up and asked, "Why do you make pie if it's just you?" "It's not a pie," I said, smiling. "It's a tart." He nodded like that answered everything.
Alan showed up not long after. No text, no warning, just the quiet click of the gate and his voice calling, "Hope I'm not interrupting any great baking experiments." He held out a box of cherries, still cool from the fridge, stems tangled and bright. "Earliest ones off the tree out back," he said. I didn't ask if he wanted to stay. I just opened the screen door and nodded. We sat in the kitchen, me, him, and 2 empty chairs. He took one, I took another, and we let the silence be. After a while, we talked. Books, tomatoes, his failed attempt at sourdough, the kind of conversation that doesn't try to prove anything. When he left, I didn't feel that hollow tug of absence, just a small, warm echo, like the aftertaste of citrus. I rinsed the plates, dried them slowly. The kitchen smelled like sugar and something cleaner, lighter. I set the table again, 3 places, one for me, one for possibility, one just in case.
Not hope, not delusion, just space. I may never be invited again, but I finally remembered I belong wherever I decide to stay. That second lemon tart sat quietly on my kitchen table. No occasion, no guest list, just the scent of citrus and the sound of bees through the open window. That day, I didn't wait to be needed. I simply allowed myself to be. Sometimes we spend years trying to be invited into someone else's life, forgetting we already had one of our own. And in that quiet return to ourselves, we remember, love doesn't have to be shared to be real. It can still be whole, it can still be warm. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to choose your peace over your place, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, share your thoughts. You're not alone. And if you're ready for another story about family, loss, and quiet strength, stay with me. The next one begins when my son put me in a nursing home and then told his sister to sell my house behind my back.